Oh, breaking news. Activision to delay New Year's Call of Duty game. Why? Why do you gotta do that for? Oh, well, that sucks. Is what it is, I guess. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Let's see if I'm on Twitter. Perfect. All right, there we go. Welcome in, though, guys. Welcome in. Just another minute or two here. We'll get started. See what's going on. But welcome in, guys. Welcome in. What a wild day. I gotta say, from what we saw from yesterday's price action over the holiday with futures to what we saw today and then the end of day price action, definitely a wild afternoon. From going yesterday thinking that we're gonna limit down, I think even Thomas in our Discord was like, "Wow, is this the point where we end up limiting down?" That didn't end up happening, but that was definitely a wild swing and a nice recovery into this morning. I gotta say, there was a point where we pretty much were green on SPY this morning before market open. So it definitely was an insanely crazy price action overnight because we did not expect that kind of full blown swing right back to the upside to basically turn us flat. And then just a slow bleed today. And that's really what you heard. A little bit more of a silence kind of day from the live team. And that's basically just because of the fact of the trend just being so slow. We just had that slow bleed today, in which there wasn't too much to really look at in terms of wild price action today. So it was really just a matter of, all right, if you got into puts early on in the morning, then you pretty much ended up paying out through the day. Otherwise, once you saw a SPY down about 5 points or so, it was a matter of just chasing. And that's why you pretty much heard myself, Avery, Dapper, and Sig. We weren't necessarily calling out plays because of the fact that at that point in time, when SPY was down about 4 to 5 points, and that's early on, then you pretty much did not want to end up chasing puts at that point in time. And then we just saw we were pretty much just waiting for Biden. He was supposed to talk at 1 p.m. Eastern. It sounded like it was going to be end up like 15 minutes earlier. That didn't end up happening. Then they ended up moving it down later. And so, lucky enough for us, we got a nice little Biden pump into the end of the day there. So what we're gonna look for now is we're gonna see if the bulls have any kind of strength going into tomorrow. All right, we want to see if there's any kind of price action that follows through on this. As we see after hours right now, SPY is up about a point and some change here, but we need to see a little bit more of a meaningful move in order for bulls to maybe take some kind of advantage in a short-term gain. All right. So targets that I'm pretty much looking at is if we end up holding these current levels from market close, is I'm going to be watching for us to maintain and hold over 431.15. That's my pivot that I have above. I do have a little bit of a zone as well that I'm currently looking at in terms of my potential first price target here on SPY between 435 half to 436 half. I'm going to be looking for that to be a potential first target, in which that may end up being the zone in which we potentially get a U-turn right back to the downside. But overall, if we can end up holding above this 436 half level and we break out of this, my first zone, then I'm overall targeting a move towards 438.48 would be where my overall target would be on SPY. Okay. And once we end up hitting that 438 target, that's when I would expect that we're likely going to end up seeing everyone load into puts and we're going to get some kind of reversal action. Whether it be off of some kind of headline or not, that's going to be whether the determining factor. As we see right now, and this is why you've probably heard me mention multiple times, maybe even yesterday on our Twitter space, holding overnight is just such a wild card. And that's why I said, like yesterday, if you were holding puts, you pretty much were panicking yesterday. If you were holding calls, you opened up this morning and you just were flat. So it kind of felt like you got a little bit of like an IV crush type situation where it's just you were just nowhere to be found, right? Not necessarily that it was IV crush though, but it was basically just a flat open, and you would have ended up having to hold, or you would have had that impression that we're going to go red to green this morning, and maybe you cut out of your puts. So that's why I say the overnight price action is very either it's going to kill your premiums and it's going to go in the opposite direction of what you have, or you're going to end up waking in the morning and we open flat and you're going to get a little bit of a confusion. All right, where direction are we going? So that's what I'll be looking for. Obviously, the downside is as well, if we're not able to hold today's levels, then I end up having us breaking down right here below. That'll be roughly between below 425.86, below that 420.85, 425.86. That smells trouble. The and the Bears have complete control in which we're gonna sink right down to the lows here, in which that's that 420 level. I did see quite a bit of puts coming in. I saw 416 and 410 puts, most notable for Friday. Those are the ones that pretty much caught my attention as to. You hear me sometimes saying on live like those are darts, but those darts end up sometimes paying, and that's what I'm gonna pay attention to. I'm hoping we get some kind of upside price action first before we get this downfall. But right now the trend just seems so strong. You probably heard Dapper on live this afternoon just saying early on there was just no volume that pretty much coincided with the bounce that we had as well early on in the morning in that pump. So that's something that's a little bit concerning. The buyers are pretty much present on both sides this afternoon. So it does feel like a flip of the coin. But as far as just trends and patterns that I'm looking at, in which I'll get into some of the plays that I'm watching. First, I'll start off with Tesla. Tesla was just rather quiet one. I saw the push just coming through the tape just rather quickly and rapid this morning, and just like that, I think at some point it was down about 40 something dollars rather quickly. But the fact that this one has just been down so much, it's been downfall since early last week. I'm gonna look to see if there's any continuation on the upside in which the market pretty much allows that to end up happening. Keyword market allows it to happen. But if we get any kind of upside action here, I'm watching for some resistance towards 847. If we can get over this 847, I do have a little bit of a zone, which is potentially a reversal zone. 855 up towards 860 will be where I'm going to potentially look for a reversal. Otherwise, bigger picture wise, if the market does want to go ahead and give us a bullish scenario here, we end up ranging about towards where we broke that trend line support. All right, if you see this orange line, that was prior trend line support. We ended up cracking back on the 18th. And so it is plausible that we can end up retesting it, which will put us towards that 886, 887 mark about. And then that'll be the point in which we get the retest of prior support. We'll test it as resistance, and then we'll get that downside action right back down. That's if we get some kind of short-term relief. That's what I would expect. What's going on, Randy? That's what I would expect for us to end up getting. But again, taking it level by level, pretty much watching to see if we reject off this 847. That's going to be a first key level. And then if we get continuation, watching that 855 to 860 level ballpark is what I'll be watching for the next reversal zone. So just taking it level by level again, I'll watch to see if this one has any kind of life. As you see, it's pretty much just been a straight line down. You have basically a heavy trend line resistance to the downside. And so that's what I want to end up seeing if we end up breaking this downtrend resistance and getting any kind of upside action here. All right. So that's one I'll keep an eye on. The other one, and I'm pretty sure you heard Avery talking about this one, was ROKU. We had those unusuals that came out pretty early. Just give me the fact of pretty much how much this downtrend has just been on ROKU. There's been no life on this one. But the fact that we ended up getting into gap fill here, that's what I'm going to be particularly watching for. Let's see if we can end up breaking the high of the day today. 128 was that high of the day. I wouldn't mind scaling in once we get over 125. 126 would rather be that closer number if you're looking round number. If we can get a push over 126, then we can get a beautiful continuation over the high of the day from today and right into the continuation on this gap fill. So that's what I'll be watching for. I know that Avery's going to have his eyes on it tomorrow morning as well on live. So if you didn't hear him talking about it today, definitely check us out on live and you can hear him talk about the levels and what he's particularly watching with Roku. Because I know that he definitely has a pretty nice setup and he's looking at something entirely different, maybe on a larger scale. So, but bigger picture from for me in terms of this is that I know larger time frame it has a defined downtrend, but I would just be playing it short term in terms of the gap fill. All right. So scaling in over 126 and watching for the break over 128. to get continuation of the gap fill is on Roku is what I'll be watching. Another one that caught my attention actually today was Expedia. Those of you that don't remember, they actually had earnings. They had a nice little pop, and then they gave all back their gains. But it's just a beautiful ascending channel that caught my attention here. We have this little gap fill here, in which if we end up filling this gap, it's likely going to end up breaking this trendline support off the ascending channel. And so I'm going to watch to see if we end up holding here. If we can hold this level around 202, test this support trend line, and then get the next leg up, that will be ideal, is what I'm particularly watching. Otherwise, it could be end up being a directional play in which if we crack under 202, we get this gap fill right down towards 198.70, and you can probably get even more continuation towards the downside, granted the market conditions. All right. Looks like you have another little bit of a support level here as well, down towards 188. So that will probably be the next target in which I'll be looking at once we complete the gap fill at 198. So this one's just in our prime location approaching the trendline resistance. So I'm going to look to see again if we end up holding it off of that 202 level, or if we break down that 202 and right into the gap fill at 198 with continuation to the downside, in which market volatility is likely going to aid towards the downside. All right. So that'll be one I'll keep an eye on. Zscaler, I actually dropped this one on my Twitter and on the premium chat. Those of you that didn't catch it, they actually have earnings coming up. You have a beautiful little falling wedge action going on here. You had the nice retest in which the market volatility helped aid this one. I'm going to look to see if we get a push towards 271 for the earnings. So I want to see us particularly take out this high that we had from yesterday. Or rather, that was this morning. High was 262.77. So it's about $3 and some change, about $3 or so that we're looking at to take out that high. If we can end up taking out that high, then I'm watching for a full move up towards 271, 272, going right into their earnings that they have on Friday. So this will be a beautiful little earnings run up potential that we have, and I'll definitely take advantage of this one. But I definitely want to see it take out that high again, take out this 262.77, and then we'll get that full blown move towards the 271, 272. If we break 272, then I'm watching the gap fill here, which you have over 276.90, and that'll complete at 280. So that will be even a bigger move. I know that I've seen Zscaler move anywhere between about 16 to about $25 on any given day in particular. So I would not be surprised to see that we have a strong earnings run up. But of course, market would need to allow that market conditions. So if the market conditions are not ideally there, then it's likely going to end up being a shorter term play in which you're likely only going to be able to target the lower end of my price targets, 271, 272. All right. So I'll keep an eye on that one. The other one that caught our attention today, those of you that didn't actually hear the alert that went off, was Splunk. We had three different alerts go off on this one. We had the rapids, the unusuals, and also a Nimbus that went off on this one. So it was just a prime setup. It had a beautiful little ascending broadening wedge action. I'm gonna watch this one. It has a nice little gap fill as well that caught my attention. So I'm gonna keep an eye on this gap fill as well. Gap fill actually starts at 122, and then it's gonna also complete here at 123.30. So I'm gonna keep an eye on that gap fill. The other thing that's a little bit more noticeable as well is if we actually do measurement here on the halfway back of this downfall, that would actually put you right in towards 119.75. So that's something to keep an eye on as well with that level, 119.75. If we end up getting over that 119.75, that's where you're pretty much leaving your runners towards that gap fill. So I'll look to see if we get a nice little entry here. Entry will likely be so if you didn't get an entry today, hopefully you can get an entry here over this 118 mark. Over 118, you take lock in some profits around the 119.75 and leave your runners right into the gap fill and let that ride. All right. So that'll be ideally what I would say to set that scenario up. What's going on, Sids? You're in Roku 150 puts. I mean, given the fact that we had the unusual calls, it's hard to go against it. I've never been a person that likes the fact of Roku in terms of calls. It's just the fact that they have a very defined downtrend resistance on a larger scale. I've never been a fan of it, but the only thing that I would probably say that's going to aid your loss in pretty much recovering it per se would likely end up being the market volatility. So that's something, if the market volatility pretty much persists, you may end up having a shot of getting a recovery. but likely tomorrow morning, if you're holding right now, tomorrow morning will give you the better storyline of whether to cut it at open or if you end up holding it or not. All right, that'll probably be the best case scenario, which I could tell you right now. But getting through just the last two tickers I'm looking at real quick. Starbucks was another one that caught my attention. A nice little falling wedge action here that caught my attention. As you see, the wedge is pretty much closing in. You do have a very much a defined downtrend support. As you see, the wicks pretty much all align off of this downtrend support line, and it's bounced every time it's hit that. So I'm gonna look to see as we pretty much approach the resistance now. Do we get a break over this resistance? I likely would not end looking to enter until it's over 94. We get the move over 94, then we're looking at gap fill here over 94.54, completing at 95.12. And if we get a move beyond that, then you also do have another gap fill here at the top that also needs to be completed, in which that ends up starting at 96.56 and completes at 96.94. So this is another one that I'll keep an eye on. I know the premiums are usually relatively cheap on Starbucks, and this thing has just been oversold for the most part. But I do like this one for the cheap premiums. A beautiful textbook little falling wedge action to break out of, and I will take this one right into the gap fill with some in the money calls. Collect some really quick and cheap premium off of that. All right. So that's a nice little quick one that you can get into. And the other one that just caught my attention later on in the day today was FedEx. And the only reason this one kind of caught my attention early on today was if you actually notice, and I pretty much zoom in, you see the little red line at the bottom. We actually had a double bottom off of the daily here today. So 216.34 was that double bottom action that we had. I'm going to look to see if we get a reversal off of this one tomorrow, in which I may end up getting some calls maybe for next week per se. And I'll get some calls pretty much pushing out towards 227.5 is what I'll be targeting on this move, in which I would need to see this double bottom hold tomorrow morning. And that'll be a beautiful one in which I get some calls going out for next week. So I do like this one. If I don't feel safe in terms of market volatility for next week, then it'll likely be for this week, in which it'll even be cheaper premiums. And I'll pretty much limit how much my exposure is there. That'll probably be the best thing I say. So definitely market conditions pretty much apply to everything. You definitely want to see what the market's going to look like come tomorrow morning. Hopefully we get a continuation off of that end of day and that afternoon pump. But the double bottom here pretty much intrigues me. I want to see if we hold this level of this 216.34, and that'll be a beautiful move that we catch towards the upside, in which we'll make a break over 220. That meant that solid number there. All right. So those are the ones that pretty much caught my attention for the most part. Not too much tech outside of Microsoft and Tesla. I know that Apple pretty much struggled quite a bit today. Pretty much was struggling with VWAP. That was not able to get over VWAP. Amazon had some early strength early on. I think we had some unusual call on that as well, if I'm not mistaken. But that one was a beautiful one as well. I know Avery also called out a Google unusual that came out that was already in the money towards the close of the market. So that was another beautiful one. We tried to see if Facebook had any strength early on this morning. That was a quick mover. I think it dipped down to about 202, ran up towards 206, and that was just a quick scalp early on this morning before the bleeding really started. So that was one. But we'll see which ones have relative strength come tomorrow morning, in which we end up getting a nice little scalp out of that. But bigger picture is this market volatility. We definitely need to see this market volatility pretty much give us a nice little relief bounce. I do like the fact that SPY is pretty much up after hours. I'm just looking to see if there's any continuation over tonight, and hopefully that the market is not swayed by just a random headline, because that's really been the bigger issue, and especially when I say swinging positions overnight. It takes one headline to really just rock your entire position, and that's really the problem right now. All right. So that's pretty much the ones I was looking at. Hopefully those quick little tickers actually helped in terms of building your own personal watches, which we all should be doing. You should all have tickers that you're watching for the next day in certain levels that you're watching. So hopefully that ends up helping you guys here today. But other than that, I think that kind of concludes what I was looking at, what I want to mention, and pretty much what I was expecting for SPY here, and that gives you guys a better picture of what I'm going to be looking at in terms of just SPY, the volatility, and specific tickers that I'll likely be taking some day trades off of. But I think the bigger one that actually intrigues me the most was the first one I pulled up, which was this Microsoft one. I definitely want to see. You probably heard me, and I believe Sig also was looking into Microsoft as well. But what intrigued me about this one is that you had a beautiful little downtrend resistance, as you see all those wicks pretty much aligned here. So I want to see us get over those wicks of this downtrend resistance. And what caught my attention was this gap fill above. I saw it hitting 290, 295 calls on Microsoft for this week. So that caught my attention pretty early on. And I want to see this break that downtrend and go right into this gap fill, in which that'll be just a beautiful move and would likely drag tech up in this little relief bounce that we're possibly going to get. And I say the word possibly. But that would end up putting us close enough towards 300, and that would just be a beautiful move towards the upside on Microsoft. So I think this is the one that probably intrigues me the most. If I had to give you my favorite out of my watch list, it would be Microsoft, but this will probably be the one that is impacted the most by the market direction. All right. So again, hopefully that ends up helping you guys. I think that'll probably be all for what I was watching, but I hope that's beneficial for all of you. But other than that, I will see you guys on live tomorrow morning, and we'll call it an afternoon. But you guys have a good night, and again, I'll see you guys in the morning. All right.